Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined by Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. Peter, how's it going? We're getting closer and closer to the playoffs in a lot of different leagues. And, there's some teams that are already kind of already there, and we're gonna run through the different leagues, and not all in this episode, but we will start with a couple leagues. But Peter, how's it going?
It's going great. Yeah. We're with the junior hockey, the season's quickly approaching. We're nearing the end, basically. It's basically crunch time for them, and even coming up to the trade deadline too. It's interesting to see which names are going to be moved, which ones are going to stay, because a lot of players are going to be in play right now. So, yeah.
For sure, yeah, it's going to be exciting to see, especially a lot of the draft eligible guys, how they perform in the playoffs, because that's where the pressure just ramps up, right? So, Dayton, how's it going? I know Saskatoon doesn't look like they don't look like they're going to make the playoffs. Eh?
Oh, I think they should make the playoffs. Maybe just in the wild card spot. They won't probably have as dominant of a finish as they did as a start, but they're going to do, I think, all right. They've got a really talented team. They just need to kind of keep building towards that. But personally, I'm tired. Feel like it's February already. Where'd January go? January was taking forever, and then all of a sudden it was just gone.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything moves so fast that I'm just hanging on for dear life. It's woof. Things are flying now.
Yeah, it does seem like the year's already started to go really quick. I said 2024 went quick, but this year is already like you say, into February, and talking about the NHL trade deadline already, and that I'm like, oh, that's almost a month away. What? I don't get. And yeah, playoffs are just around the corner. It seems like we just finished that, but yeah, and the draft too is actually coming up pretty quick, and we'll keep anticipating that, see how that all goes. First time it's not going to be, what do they call it? Decentralized. It's going to be decentralized. It's not going to be in it's not normal format, I guess, as what we're used to, but we're still going to do our prospect profiles and all that fun stuff here at the Hockey Writers. So let's jump in, and we'll start far west and check in on the Western Hockey League to start. And Dayton, I'll start with you, since that's your bread and butter. You follow WHL more than any other league. So what do you think about some of the players it's a big league. Obviously, we can't go through the whole league and talk about all the players, but anyone that's really stood out to you throughout, almost to the end of the season here, player-wise?
Oh, yeah, there's a ton that have stood out. It's been a really fun season to follow along to. I think the top guy who stands out is the top scorer, Andrew Cristall. He's been fantastic, and it seems like he might have a bit of a chip on his shoulder after he was left off Team Canada's roster. He should have been on. That was, for me, the most egregious absence on that list. And then he was traded to the Spokane Chiefs. He already had 60 points in 28 games going to the Chiefs, which is crazy. 26 goals. In the 10 games he's been in Spokane, he's got 29 points. I don't remember a player ever putting up numbers like that before. That's ridiculous. That's almost 3 points per game. Man, it's fun to have a player like that in the league right now. Chasing him, very close behind, is Gavin McKenna, another big standout. He's got 88 points in 42 games, and with him kind of leading the Medicine Hat Tigers, they have started to challenge the Everett Silvertips for first place in the league. Everett's been in first basically since the season started. They've had a very strong, dominant team, and night in and night out, they've been one of the biggest, you can't get by them. They just play a bigger, better game than everyone else. They have bigger, better players. They have, when they came to Saskatoon, it was like watching an AHL team take on a junior team. They just looked like they were in a different league. And the Medicine Hat Tigers now look like they are ready to challenge that. It helps that they added one of the best defensemen in the league with Tanner Mollendijk, and they've started to get some more consistent goaltending. That was one of the things that was kind of plaguing them. But yeah, I think those two guys have really stood out as what you'd call maybe like MVPs. They're transforming the teams that they're with and doing stuff that I don't think we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, Cristall, I mean, we've talked about him many times on this show, and he's exploded this season. And we talked about the amount of points he's put up the last month or so, and it's just insane what he's doing right now. And Gavin McKenna, he's not draftable until 2026. And how many years have we talked about him already? Probably, I want to say 2 already. It's been a few years, and he's still not able to be drafted until next year. And I mean, it's funny how we're closing in on that soon too, but he's definitely going to be flirting with that first overall pick status. And we'll be talking about him more, I'm sure, as we keep going. Peter, what about you in the Western Hockey League? I know you're based in Ontario, but of course you follow the Western League too. What have you seen throughout this season so far in terms of standouts?
Well, for me, every year I always get prepped up for the draft and focusing on the names that, are going to stand out in, the major junior leagues. And so far in the WHL, obviously, Dayton mentioned Andrew Cristall and Gavin McKenna, but it's really great to see how all of the draft eligible players coming out of the WHL are, within the top 22 or 25 in league scoring right now. I mean, Ben Kendall has jumped off the page, and before I should get into the stats, it's like each one of these players have their own different skill set that's making them successful. So Ben Kendall, as I just mentioned, he's third in WHL scoring, and he's draft eligible. He has 81 points, 52 assists, and he's got the IQ to create anywhere on the ice. Carter Bear, he's at high energy, aggressive forward with a lethal shot. Continue to go down the list. You have Cole Resheny, who's one of the smart and cerebral playmakers in this draft. He's got a soft set of hands. Cameron Schmidt, we know how lethal he is with his accuracy, his shooting, and his ability to pressure defenders and put them on their heels. Nathan Bem, kind of the same thing as Carter Bear. He likes to use the size to his advantage, and he's got that skill set that works to his advantage. And I may be mistaken, but I don't see Lyndon Lajkovic in the top 20 in the top league in scoring so far. If I miss him, I'm probably just not looking properly. But I'm going to talk about Lyndon Lajkovic anyways, because he has jumped off the page and his impact has really stood out in a big way. Starting with that CAHL USA Top Prospects game right now. So, yeah, it's been really impressive to see all these players jump up, make their impact, and improve their stock overall, because seeing them in the mix as the league leader in production basically shows that they're the real deal and their value is going to be sky high once draft day comes.
Yeah, it is pretty cool to see a lot of these draft eligible guys being in that top tier of scoring. I mean, usually it's the drafted prospects dominating the leagues because, of course, they're older. They've been there for much longer. But you're looking at guys like the guys you mentioned already are all in the top. And you got Gavin McKenna, who's not even going to be drafted this year in that top portion as well. And I'm sure he's going to be there next season too in his draft year, maybe even more so as he, when he will be drafted. So we'll see how that all goes. The Western Hockey League is always fun to watch because they are, traditionally more of a defensive league. But they do have some high-end scorers this season, which we've mentioned a few of them already. And you're looking at even some of the defensemen have been, in the point race as well. One guy, Sorminio is not in the high-end offense. He's doing a lot better, a lot more than what he was supposed to do from his draft year. But I've been really impressed. And even when he's, getting traded to the Calgary Hitmen now, still a leader on that blue line. And coming from a Seattle Thunderbirds team that wasn't that good this season, he's now on a team that could potentially make some noise in the playoffs. And Canucks prospect, of course, he's a guy that, the Canucks already have a few defensemen in their pipeline. I'll mention one of them in prospects of the week, but they actually have a pretty good pipeline coming. Tom Willander, Sorminio could potentially be a guy, and maybe wasn't expected to be when he was drafted, but looks maybe more of a two-way defenseman now. And I've been really impressed, not just from last season, but this season too. He seems to be building on that two-way game rather than just being that strictly defensive defenseman. That kind of, I wrote his prospect profile, was saying, he's going to be a Chris Tanev, Jacob Slavin type. He could potentially be just that too. And a lot of offense doesn't translate from the junior leagues for some of these defensemen, but I still think he may have more potential now to be a two-way guy than he was when he was drafted. And that's some good news for the Canucks because they don't have a really strong prospect pool, but they got some intriguing guys that they've drafted in the later rounds that maybe going to be pretty good as we keep going here.
And let's not forget about Landon DuPont too.
Yeah.
Like just coming off exceptional status, 16 years old, 50 points already in 47 games, 12 goals. He's one of the top defenders already in league scoring right now, which is very impressive. We talk about how, how well these young players are going to adjust at the next level, but he's just absolutely dominating the competition right now. So we're already talking about him right now. Same thing as Gavin McKenna. We're talking about him 2-3 years before his draft eligible year. And now he's already one of the top premier players in that league. So,
yeah, DuPont's been, again, a guy that's not drafted, going to be drafted for a long time here. And he's already making waves in the league. And not an easy league to be a defenseman in either because, a lot of great defensemen come out of the WHL. And they're usually very well-rounded defensemen when they get here. It's going to be interesting to watch these guys, not just this draft because they're not going to be drafted this year, but next year and the year after that too.
Slight correction on my part. He's 15. He's not even 16 years old. So
yeah,
he's younger. He's younger and he's already demolishing that league, which is a very tough one. So
yeah, just set a point record or tied a point record for teenage defenseman or rookie defenseman in the WHL.
Where is he going to be at even just next year? What about 17, 18 years old? Yeah, there's a lot more stuff to come from DuPont, that's for sure. All right, let's move into the Ontario Hockey League now. And Peter, I'll start with you since that's your locale. Who do you see? There's lots of great players in here too. A couple of guys that are going to be drafted in the high part of the draft too. So who are you kind of impressed by so far?
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say that, the draft eligibles aren't living up to their name. Michael Misa leading the league in points, 40 goals, 88 points. Jake O'Brien as a draft eligible, looking pretty solid as a solid two-way playmaking center. Porter Martome, he's kind of fallen off a little bit, but, it's so impressive to see him be one of the top draft eligible prospects. I think he's going to be so within the top 5 anyways. So it's great to see him with his energy and his dynamicism to be that agitator, power forward, player that could do a lot of damage in tight spaces. But I'm going to name 2 different players, and that's Nick Lardis and Kieran Walton. Lardis, teammates with Jake O'Brien as well on the Brantford Bulldogs, but 48 goals this season, 81 points. He's knocking on that 50 door, just like Carson Rakoff did about a couple seasons ago, or last season even as well. It's really tough to score 50 goals in any league, even in junior, if you think about it as well, given how well some teams are great and the competition is tough to go up against. So to see him as a 3rd round pick from the Chicago Blackhawks get, take this big step forward. I wrote his draft profile. I really loved his shooting, his accuracy. He's absolutely lethal from anywhere on the ice. And, imagine pairing him up in the future with, let's say, a kid named Connor Bedard, who's already in the NHL right now, right? Having both of them feed each other the puck, shooting, because we know how well their shots are. It's just impressive to see him take this big leap forward this season compared to the last season where he only had 50 points in 37 games with Brantford. So another big jump in the regular season this time around. So great to see that. But also Kieran Walton, one of those under the radar picks, and I wrote his profile as well. And Mark Shag, fellow THW writer and who does a lot of draft content as well, a lot of the features, had him as a steal of the draft, and 72 points in 46 games this season after he had 43 and 65. And to have 43 points on a deep Sudbury Wolves team that had the likes of Dalibor Dvorsky, David Goyette, Quentin Musty, the depth is going to push you down a little bit. So you saw potential of what he could do in the bottom six, and now that he has that opportunity, he's elevated his game to a new level right now. So the fact that he's top 10 in scoring in this league with 72 points, 28 goals, 44 assists, it's a great sign that, maybe me and Mark were onto something about him when we did the profiles, and he made him the steal of the draft, because he's looking pretty good right now. And when you get to those later rounds, you want to try and hit on those home run type of swings. And the Winnipeg Jets may have just gotten that with Kieran Walton.
Yeah, that it's always great that a guy does that when you're pinpointing him as a steal of the draft, and he is looking like the steal of the draft so far. And check out that article if you haven't. Because lots of great stuff from Mark when he did write that article ahead of the 2024 draft. I mean, and Peter, of course, I wrote his profile too. So check those out because he's been great for I know the Winnipeg Jets writing team has highlighted him, I believe, as well. So that's some great stuff for Walton. All right, Dayton, what about you from the OHL? What do you kind of for players that have impressed?
I think, if we're going to talk about profiles that we wrote, Liam Greentree is really standing out this year. Mm-hmm. One thing that stood out, I wrote his profile, obviously, while watching some of his stuff last year, and looking at his impact and where he was going to fall in the first round, because he was pretty much guaranteed a first round pick. He was doing a lot with not a lot of support around him. The Windsor Spitfires were not a strong team, and this season, things are going a little bit better. Where are they in the standings here? Oh, look at that! They're top of the West Division. So this is another guy who I think has been just a really big impact player. And now that he's got another year under his belt, he is, in his second year of captaincy. He's on pace to almost hit 50 goals and score over 110 points. That is a good jump for a young player like that. And it helps that he's got a few more guys around him. Just pulling him up here. Ilya Protas, he is now on the team his first year. He's got 77 points in 43 games. That helps make a team better. And then AJ Spalassi, I think I'm saying that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
He's also been pretty solid. More of a depth scorer, but helping fill out that lineup and provide that secondary scoring. So the Windsor Spitfires, big jump in the standings. They're doing great, and I think it's a lot to do with how well Liam Greentree has been playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at you mentioned those three players. They've all been big parts of that turnaround. I mean, the Spitfires are usually one of the top teams in the league, but really fell off last season. And those guys have been big parts of why they're now back to where they usually are. In the OHL, and you're looking at Spalassi. It's funny. I wrote his profile too, and I've been impressed. I was impressed before this season with him, and again, the Blackhawks got a pretty good guy for for where they got him in the draft. And he could potentially be a really good depth guy in the NHL too. But his story is really nice too. So check out his prospect profile if you haven't yet with him too. And anything that the Blackhawks writing team has put out on him, because I know they've featured him a couple times too. But yeah, the Windsor Spitfires have been really impressive this season, and those three guys have been reasons why. All right, well, that's the OHL. I mean, like I say, we haven't mentioned all the players in the OHL. There's lots of guys. But anyone else you want to mention before we move out of those two leagues and go through our prospects of the week here?
There's one more player I would like to highlight. Some of those underage, or not underagers, but overage players that are seeking out, possible contracts and looking to sign with an NHL club at some point. I general manager of the Maple Leafs, Brad Treliving, he was at an Erie Otters game, and it was kind of tough to get a sense of who he was trying to look at, because Matthew Schaefer's injured. I don't think Malcolm Spence is in the card because they don't have a first-round pick at the moment. Anything could change to get that. But I think he was looking at some of those overage players, and Sam Alfano and Pano Fimis were the only two names that came into mind for me, because of the fact of how well they've adjusted and how well they're leading as overage players. And I think Alfano fits the bill of where the Maple Leafs want to go in terms of their direction. 6'4", 204 pounds, 30 goals, 57 points, can crash the net, can do a lot of damage down low along the boards, and he wins battles very, very easily. I like the upside that he brings, and he could be on their target. And Pano Fimis as well, more of a playmaker, but still productive for the Erie Otters. It'll be interesting to see which teams try to take a swing on him, because he's 5'11", 183. He was one of the top OHL selections in the past. He was a second-round pick of Niagara in 2020, but with a lot of these players that were drafted in 2020, 21, a lot of their developments and, were stunted because of a missed season, the pandemic, and everything like that. So they missed out, and they kind of feel like they're a step behind, and it feels right now they're only reaching their steps. So those are two names that should get a lot of attention come the period where they need to sign a contract, or if the NHL team basically has them on the radar, because there's a lot of potential for both players right there.
Yeah, a lot of those overagers and guys, like you said, about that around that time, 2020, 2021, it's kind of so interesting. Some of these players that are kind of coming up here and where they are in their development. And yeah, some teams could get maybe a steal later on, just getting these guys now. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where a lot of these overage guys go. I mean, just going from the Canucks, Archie Baines, he's turned into a pretty good pro, and he was an overager. And you never know. A lot of these guys are just late bloomers, stuff like that, and teams take a chance on them, and they turn into something in the NHL. And there's a few guys right now that are of that category. So yeah, it's good to watch those guys. All right, let's move into our prospects of the week, as we always do on the show to end it. And I'll start with you, Dayton. Who are you giving the prospect of the week this week?
Well, speaking of overagers who could draw some interest from NHL teams, I'm going to go with Max Hildebrandt, the goalie for the Prince Albert Raiders. Not a name that I think a lot of people are familiar with, but he was just named goaltender of the week in the WHL. And that was due to him putting up back-to-back .939 save percentage nights. So he put up a couple of wins. In fact, he hasn't posted a loss since January 8th. So that's, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 games. He is on an 8-game winning streak and hasn't posted a save percentage below, only one below a .914 over those last 8 games. He's just been really, really solid for the Raiders and made them into a potential playoff threat. He is undrafted. He's a 20-year-old junior player, and so he's off to the NCAA next season. I can't remember where right now, not off the top of my head, but he will be one of the first heading over there. Yeah, he's been fantastic. Just a really solid goaltender. He plays the net really well. He's got good size. And he, like, at 6'1", he's not the biggest goalie, but he uses his frame really, really well. And like he'll make a lot of really smart, really clutch saves where I'm not sure like how he knew to get into that position. Stole a couple from the Blades the last time they played, which was a little sad, but he's a very good goalie. I'll also throw in Andrew Cristall again because why not? He's been fantastic. The last two games, he has 3 goals and 10 points. So that's crazy. And I want him to hit 150 this year. That'd be fantastic.
10 points is what, my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. So sometimes some players don't get that in a week. Or 2 weeks. Yeah, he's just been on fire, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down, that's for sure. All right, Peter, who do you have as your prospect of the week?
I went to the Q last week to talk about Bill Zonin, and I'm going to same the Q this week, and I'm going to talk about the top draft-eligible QMJHL player in Caleb Denoye from the Moncton Wildcats. The production may not show it. It may seem very kind of average. He has 65 points this season in 65 points in 41 games. I mean, with that kind of production, it's nothing to brush off. It really is impressive, but it's his two-way game that really stands out to me. And he's very, very calm. He does a lot of the little things right with his work ethic, his determination, and it's evident throughout the whole entire season. And even the last couple games, in the last 4 games, he has 4 goals and 5 points. So the production is very consistent in terms of his play throughout the season. Very little he's had like games or stretches where he's gone on multi or games without a point kind of thing. He's been very productive every single month to this point, and he's already off to a good start in February with 2 goals. So yeah, I just felt like it was time to continue the trend of top QMJHL players, and Caleb Denoye is my prospect of the week.
Yeah, I mentioned before, the Q hasn't had as many high-end guys for first round, but looks like Denoye is definitely going to be in there high up in the draft this coming 2025 draft. So I will keep an eye on him. I'm going to, like I mentioned before, I'm going to mention a Canucks prospect as my prospect of the week, and that is Elias Pettersson. Of course, in the NHL debut I mentioned before, but yesterday against the Colorado Avalanche, probably had his most impressive game of the season. Going up against, of course, the Avalanche have McKinnon, Makar, all those guys, but Pettersson really impressed me. One, he took away a goal for I think it was Lehkonen on the side of the net. He dove out and poked the puck away from him, laid a big check on one of the Avalanche player later in the game, and then stood up for Connor Garland and almost fought a guy, but got pulled away from it. But he's not afraid to go into into those scrums, and of course, the physical guy. Really reminds me of Matthias Ohlund type defenseman. He could potentially bring some offense, but he is very good two-way defenseman and very impressed. And a guy that was drafted later on in the draft, and to be potentially, a top 4 type guy down the line. Very impressed with what he's done in the AHL so far. He was named to the AHL All-Star game. Didn't play, of course, because he's in the NHL. But he's been really impressive for the Canucks. He shouldn't be put out of the lineup for a guy like Noel Juleson, but that's another story. He can move the puck. He's probably one of the better puck movers on the Canucks right now. They have added Marcus Pettersson. They've cornered the market on Pettersson's, but Marcus Pettersson too, and added a bit more mobility. But Elias Pettersson's really added to that as well. So I'm on board with the Petterssons. Just hopefully he can potentially be that top 4 guy, maybe down the line, but looks to be very early in his career. Very impressed. All right, well, that's another episode of Prospect Corner. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dayton, for coming on. Make sure to check out everything at thehockeyriders.com, as always, for all of our prospect coverage as we continue throughout the season and into the more draft coverage as we keep going. And that'll wrap up pretty soon as we keep the rankings keep coming out, all that stuff. Maybe try to get Andrew on to talk about his rankings soon. He just put out his first ones, which later on, but we'll maybe try to get him on. Make sure checking everything out. Until our next episode, we will see you next time.